All right, now I will add to the introduction, just so you know. Yes, I am a grave digger. It's just a part-time job. In the winters, I'm laid off, so I don't. I took all the dirt out of my nails, and I am the gas man, so I fix pipes. So if anybody needs your gas fireplace fixed, I can come after and do that for you. But I am a man of trade. But it's amazing what God does with. He works through people, and again, I'm so grateful to be here because this is where I was born. I was born in Brampton. This is like I got to come back to my.
Don't feel memorial.
It's all good. It's all good. So I was born in Brampton, so it's great, and I'm one of 12 children, which is a little different. So I'm a well-adjusted child. So I'm well-adjusted. I learned I got some food, so I was happy today. So and I think that was a great training ground for me to learn how to speak, to be heard. Everyone should be one of 12 children. Okay? So that's good. All right. So basically, I've been dubbed the Fulton Sheen expert, and it came about in just a quiet little way. I always call it a God incident, but it was in 2009 that I picked up my very first Bishop Sheen book, and it was this book here called The Victory Over Vice. And so when I read this book, what Fulton Sheen did for me was, he was the first priest to kind of make me feel guilty. Not that I'm a sinner, we're all sinners, but Fulton Sheen in his beautiful way would converse with us and almost say, he was not a finger-pointing bishop. He never came on television and said, you're bad, you're wrong. He'd say, you're better than this. I know you're better than this. And isn't God great, He'd give an example, like he'd say, went to the Sarah Club meeting in Brampton and had a great breakfast served to me. And, how many of us really thanked the cook when it was all said and done? And usually 9 out of 10 people never thank the cook, right? But he'd go, isn't it funny how our Lord, he healed 10 lepers, and only one of the lepers came back to thank him. And so he'd use a scripture, he'd use something like that just to shame us in a nice way, to bring us closer to Christ. And so that was the style he had. So this book started me on a journey of just starting to just read more and more of his works. And so he had a beautiful way of taking our Lord's Passion, the 7 last words, and relating it to the 7 deadly sins as the antidote. As the antidote. I think we all have a sin problem. We don't want to admit it. But when we think about the sin of anger, he says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Our Lord from the cross. He says to the sin of gluttony, he says, I thirst. He thirsts for that relationship, to spend time with him. For the sin of laziness, he said, it is finished. I got the mission done. What about you? So all these things. So this book, got my attention. I don't want to say it changed my life. It changed my mind. But it helped change my life too. So right away, I started to just see the wisdom of Fulton Sheen. I started to read. And I've been on the radio for many, many years. Since 2006, I've been the host of the Holy Rosary program on FM 98.5 CKWR. And a lot of people that meet me for the first time, and they find out I'm on radio, they go, oh, I thought you were bigger. I thought you were taller. With the voice, you try to envision what people look like. But so I went to the radio station that I had done the Holy Rosary on, and I said, could I do a Fulton Sheen show, a Bishop Sheen show? And the owners of the radio station said, oh, that would be a good idea. And so I phoned and wrote and got permission from all the people who have the copyrights on certain Sheen recordings and publications, and got permission to rebroadcast his old radio addresses, his lectures, and everything. And so in 2012, I took Fulton Sheen back onto the air on a public radio station. And I'll never forget the first time I went into the radio station, I had 2 talks. One was on angels, his famous talk on angels, and another talk on, it was like a catechism talk, but it was about, I don't know if it was on forgiveness, but it was just a really good, memorable talk. And I never forget, no one ever calls me at the radio station. I go in and do the Holy Rosary. No one ever calls me and says, oh, that was a great Ave Maria you played. But I'll never forget, so I started playing this show on angels, And then all of a sudden the phone lines lit up. I'm there 7:30 in the evening on a Monday night playing Fulton Sheen on a public radio station, and the phone started to light up. Oh, is he alive? Is he coming back to Kitchener to speak? And I saw him in 1976, you know. And then another lady from Milton called me and said, oh, wow, I haven't heard him in years, and I became Catholic because of him. And so all these stories. So every week I go to the radio station, and people will be calling in to the radio station saying, making compliments and stuff. So I knew somehow God was touching hearts, and that Fulton Sheen had brought, you know, tens of thousands of souls closer to Christ. And so I started to say, wow. So I just kept doing what I was doing. And then all of a sudden I read this book called The Priest Is Not His Own. And, you know, I'm a father of 3 children, grandfather to 4. And when I read this book, it really gave me a great description of what a father should be. You know, I'm the father, I'm the priest of the domestic church of my own home. And so all of this resonated with me to become a better husband and a domestic priest of my domestic church. And I thought, this is a great manual. My day job is, I'm the gas man. I fix pipes. And for 20 years, I've been training apprentices, young men to how to fix pipes. And they go off and, you know, become full-time, and they get all their licenses. And I thought, this would be a great book as a trainer, saying, maybe I should go to the seminary and go to the seminary and present this to the seminarians to make sure they have the book, right?
Wow.
So I was in the Adoration Chapel praying a holy hour, and that's one thing that Fulton Sheen taught me, was to pray the holy hour. He made it very clear. And he actually had a 62-year commitment to the holy hour. He made a promise when he was a seminarian to make a holy hour each day. And what inspired him was a story, and you might have heard the story, of there was a persecution in China. And the authorities were, you know, rounding up Catholics and, you know, killing a number of them. And the authorities broke into a church and, of course, knocked the tabernacle over, and there was 33 hosts that were strewn on the floor. And they threw the priest in jail, but this little girl saw that, knew that, and every night that little girl snuck into the church and consumed one host, got down on her knees and consumed one host, and did that for 33 consecutive nights. And on the 33rd night, the police or the guards heard her, found her, and killed her. And he thought, if this girl could brave her life 33 days to just honor the Lord, I have to do something. And that's where he had this commitment, this promise, to spend an hour with the Lord each day in the holy hour. And so I thought, it works for Sheen, it's got to work for us, you know. And the holy hour transforms us. And so I never forget that time I was having a holy hour, and I was praying, and I said to Fulton Sheen, oh, I got you on the radio, what do you think? You know, I said, I feel like making requests today, just whatever you ask, you go ahead and do it. I'll do it for you, right? I shouldn't have said that, right? And so I'm sitting there, and in those little interior voices we all have, those little things, I felt Fulton Sheen saying, I want you to go and do the work I was doing at the end of my life. And so for the last 10 years of Fulton Sheen's life, he gave priestly retreats. He had retired being the Bishop of Rochester, and so he handed his resignation in, and he then said, I'm going to spend the last 10 years of my life just giving priestly retreats and retreats to seminarians. That's all he did, because he wanted to make sure that every seminarian and priest had a love of the Eucharist, a love of the Holy Hour, a love for Our Lady. And he says, that's my mission. I just want to make sure that these priests and these seminarians continue this very beautiful devotion. And so Sheen wrote 2 books on the priesthood, The Priest Is Not His Own in 1962, and Those Mysterious Priests in 1973, almost in a way to say, you know, I want to readdress this. I want to remind everybody that there's a right way to do things. And so he said in this interior voice, I want you to go and do the work that I was doing at the end of my life. And I said, yeah, but I'm a plumber. I'm the gas man, you know. I'm not a theologian. I'm not a lecturer at seminary. But he just said, just trust. I mean, Bishop Sheen was a farm boy. He was a farm kid, you know, and he turned out okay, right? So anyway, so I just phoned up the rector of the seminary in London, phoned him up and said, hi, I'm Al Smith. I'm a radio announcer. I'm a Sarin. And I had this idea to bring some Fulton Sheen books to the seminarians. And he says, come on down. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to just trust in the Lord. So I had the gas man truck, the big plumbing truck. I pulled up to the seminary, and I had the Bishop Sheen books, The Priest is on His Own, Life of Christ, The World's First Love. And I pulled up to the seminary, and I said, Lord, I need a sign. I need a sign that this is not me, that this is you. So I never forget, I pulled in, and I went up to the front door of the seminary, and a seminarian greeted me. But young people don't have what I call the greatest manners sometimes, you know, these days, right? In the old days, it was yes, sir, no, sir. But I came to the front door, and he says, who are you? He says, but meanwhile, I had my suit and tie on. I was dressed, you know. And I said, well, my name's Al Smith, and I'm a Sarin, and I'm here to make a presentation on Archbishop Sheen to the seminarians and the teaching staff at the seminary. And this young man, all of a sudden, he straightened up, and he said, Mr. Smith. Call me Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith. He says, I have to tell you a true story. I was 18 years old. I graduated from grade 12. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Some lady from the church gave me the book, The Priest is Not His Own. I read that book, put it down, and within 2 weeks I applied to become a priest in seminary in the Diocese of London. I'm in my 5th year. I have a full Fulton Sheen library up in my room. I have 40 of his books. Welcome to St. Peter's Seminary. Wow.
Praise God.
I know. So then I'm going, okay. so there was my sign.
Wow. That's wonderful.
My sign from God to not be afraid. Be who you are. The gas man, a Sarin, but just we're here to share tools. You know, I think of one of the best descriptions of a priest. It was in a book entitled "To Save 1,000 Souls." It's a book that Father Barrett wrote that many seminarians will read because it answers all the questions about formation. You know, what's involved in becoming a priest. And it says in the very beginning, a priest is someone who brings Jesus to the people and brings the people to Jesus. He brings Jesus to the people through the sacraments and blessing, and then he encourages us to come to Jesus. That's what a priest is. And I thought the most important thing I can do is have these seminarians fall in love with Jesus. If I can bring them closer to Jesus, then I've done, my day's work. Bring them closer to Jesus so they can bring us to Jesus. It's this whole idea. And this is what Fulton Sheen does so well, is that he instructs us. I always say I'm a very good plumber. I can fix pipes almost in my sleep. But Fulton Sheen is an expert on Jesus Christ. He really is. So if you want to know who Jesus Christ is, read Fulton Sheen. Listen to Fulton Sheen. Watch Fulton Sheen, and you'll see. So I just knew that how do we change the church? How do we make it better? Let's raise up another 400 Fulton Sheens. Let's try to just go into the seminary and try to put these books into seminarians' hands so that seminarians will be formed with the writings of Fulton Sheen, which are pretty well St. Thomas Aquinas' writings, but converted into everyday English. And so that's his gift. So any book that you read. And the beauty of the church, in that the church declared him venerable. I sit on the board of directors for his cause of his canonization. And Bishop Daniel Jenke of Peoria wrote me back in 2013 and said, would you like to sit on the board of directors for Archbishop Sheen to help with the cause for his canonization? And I said, well, you know, I'm a plumber, right? No, he says, no, because you just have this heart of sharing Fulton Sheen on public radio, sharing with the seminarians. You get it. You get the idea that you want everybody to read Sheen, listen to Sheen, watch Sheen. And so I'm the only non-American on that board of directors. So I feel blessed to be a part of this process. But in 2012, Pope Benedict XVI declared Bishop Sheen Venerable, which means that every book has been approved by the church. Every one of his writings was scrutinized, every one of his radio addresses, every one of his television shows were screened by the Vatican, and they can't find any error in any of these books. So it's very reassuring. You know, I can always look someone straight in the eye and say, pre-approved, pre-approved. And then always, you know, to the, I want to say, you know, there's some people that say, you know, I'm pre-Vatican II, or I'm Vatican II. It doesn't matter. This was wrote in 1940, pre-Vatican, it's approved, you know. This one was wrote in 1973, it's approved. So it doesn't matter if it's the books from the 30s and 40s or the books from the 70s, they're all approved. So everything that I have on the table is approved. So I know I can go to bed at night and say everything's good. So we're good. So again, it's just this example of you know, growing where you're planted, just kind of having this vision. And I guess trust in the Lord. I just let him, you know, send the money to raise money to buy books, you know. I mean, I had this desire to go out west. I thought, okay, I've been to the seminary in Toronto, I've been to the seminary in London, I've been to the Oratory of St. Philip Neri and lectured. I said, Lord, there's a seminary out in Edmonton, and there's a seminary out in Vancouver, Mission, BC. I think I need to go there. So you just send me the money and that, and then of course there's a little old lady in Cambridge. Oh, I'll give you $4,000 to buy books for seminarians and all this other stuff. And I said, oh yeah, I need gas money too, right? And so she wrote me a check for $2,000 for gas money, and I used $1,987.13. I kept the other $17, right? You know, but the gas to go out west and back, you know, drive the 5,000 kilometers and back, was like, it was almost to the penny, So I just knew. I got home at 21 days later, because it took me 21 days to go from my house in Cambridge at the time and drive out west. And every night I spoke at a Sarah club, a parish. I stayed in church rectories, and it was amazing, the network of priests. This is how it happened. First night I spoke in Sudbury, and then the priest in Sudbury phoned ahead because they were all seminarian classmates. And then I had a room to stay in the next town. And then I had a room to stay in the next town.
Praise God.
And the next town. And I never had to dip into my pocket to pay for hotels because I always stayed with a priest, you know. And of course it was easy. I just give them a, you know, thanks for breakfast, here's a book, you know. we were okay. But the Lord took me across out west to lecture at seminarians, with seminarians, at Sarah clubs, and university campuses. It's amazing what the young people are hungry. They want some truth. And Fulton Sheen preaches truth in season and out of season. So University of Calgary, University of Saskatchewan, UBC, all the universities, I got to speak on the campus. So the Lord, whenever you just say yes, you just stand back and let God do the rest. So, and so the last thing I'll end with, I mean, I could talk for hours and hours about Fulton Sheen, and I want to answer your questions too. But I put together this anthology, and people always ask me about, this is my little labor of love. And so what I found was, you know, Sheen wrote 30 years worth of newspaper columns. So every week you'd see Fulton Sheen writes from 1949 to 1970. And for 20 years he was on the radio in the 30s and 40s. And he was on television in the 50s and 60s. And he wrote 66 books. 9 of the books that he wrote were on the 7 last words, our Lord's Passion. And I thought, there's something here. 62 years of holy hour preaching. And Bishop Sheen, in his last recorded address, he was talking on the 7 last words. He says, this is my 58th consecutive year of preaching on Christ and Him crucified. 58 years. So I knew his second most important teaching was on the Passion, the 7 last words. And I saw all these books, the Cross and the Beatitudes, Victory over Vice, 7 Virtues, the 7 Words of Jesus and Mary, Calvary and the Mass. All those books were on the 7 last words, and with a different theme. And I thought, we need to just put them into a catechesis, put them all into one book. And so I wrote to the United States, went to the Library of Congress, secured permission. And in fact, 3 of the books in this anthology, this is 7 books in one, have never been seen in 80 years. They were never republished. The book in 1937, entitled The Rainbow of Sorrow, it's The Rainbow of Sorrows, where Sheen writes about unjust suffering, pain. It was never republished because no one wants to read about unjust suffering, pain. But today we do, because we say, why? Why unjust suffering? Why pain? There's a reason. There's a reason for it. So we republished that. The book, The 7 Virtues, 1940. Who wants to know about fortitude, prudence, faith? Well, now we do. Now we want prudence. We want faith. All these things. And in 1944, there was a book he wrote, The 7 Words to the Cross, where he talked about the humanist, the intelligentsia, the moderns, the thinkers. These are the labels, the nice people. So again, these are all books now that I think we want to reread, but they've been hidden for all these years. So I put them together into the anthology. So when everybody says, oh, I have all of Fulton Sheen's books, I have all his books, I go, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because there's 3 books no one has till now, so it's good. But so this is my labor of love. I'm a thrifty guy. I don't want to be paying $80 for 7 books, Put it all together in one book for $20. But again, it's this catechesis of, if you want to fall in love with Jesus, stare at a crucifix. These are the crucifixes I use in my ministry. They're called Jesus the Listener crucifixes. And many of you might have known Jesus the Listener up in Huntsville, Father Claudio Piccini, a Passionist father. And he, was always promoting being a Passionist, always about the cross. But Fulton Sheen said, and he said, you can have a statue of a Buddha, rub its belly, you can have a beautiful picture of the Sphinx, the 7 wonders of the world, but you put one of these on your desk for 3 days, and it changes you. It changes you. Because it convicts you. It says, I had something to do with this. So the crucifix. And that's what Fulton Sheen does so well. He brings us to the cross and involves us. He says, come to the foot of the cross. I'm talking to you. Those 7 last words are still alive and well today. But again, it's through the cross. So that's why this is called the cries of Jesus from the cross. For us to ponder and meditate on the 7 last words. And so I figured if I can only do one thing, and of course it would be to put this book together. And so that's the reason for this creation of the book. And so that's the story behind it. And I dedicated the book to Our Lady Seat of Wisdom, because it was at Our Lady Seat of Wisdom Academy that I found my first Sheen book. The very first Sheen. I dropped my daughter off at the university to send her off for 3 years. And there we found Fulton Sheen together. My wife found this little discarded Fulton Sheen book called Peace of Soul. And we sat in the car together and read it on the way home. I was driving, she was reading it. And the very first line in that book, Peace of Soul, it says this: unless souls are saved, nothing is saved. Unless souls are saved, nothing is saved. And I knew that was my battle cry. Because if this isn't for Christ, then don't bother. If it's not for souls, then don't bother. But that's the thing, unless souls are saved, nothing is saved. Dennis can model my shirt, my clothing line with Fulton Sheen. He's wearing the School of Sheen. And so on the back, it says, unless souls are saved, nothing is saved. BishopSheenToday.com. So, you always have to have a clothing line. I have the Gasman clothing line. I have Bishop Sheen clothing line. So I didn't bring the clothing line today because it sells out every time. So it's good. Anyway, so I'll leave with that. Unless souls are saved, nothing is saved. And so we need to go to the cross. where we'll fall in love with Jesus more and more each day. There we go. Anyway, so I'm here. Questions? I've been a Saran since 2011, officially, but the Sarans have been in my life for 30 years. They were always active in Kitchener. They've been in existence for 50 years. So the Sarah Club in Kitchener-Waterloo is an older club, and so they've been active in the community for years. And so I've been going to Sarah events for many years, but I officially said I need to join. And so I did in 2011. I'm glad I did, because again, the one thing about being a Sarah is it has a call to holiness. You read the manuals, you start to see things, and you know it's like no other group. It's a group that has a catechesis that say, I want you to become holy. There is this push for a call to holiness as a Sarah. And so that's one thing that I try to share. If you're trying to become holy, become a Sarah. And start, reading the literature, reading the stuff that they put out. They have a beautiful prayer manual that they have. Speaking of prayer, I've been involved with this group called the Foundation of Prayer for Priests. And back in 2014, the president of the Foundation of Prayer for Priests, the co-founder, called me and said, I'd like you to sit on my board of directors because we want to start praying for priests. You're a Saran, you're involved with Sheen. Could you do this? And she wrote this little book, and it's full of rosary meditations to pray for priests, for seminarians. Just a $10 manual, but a great little apostolate, the Foundation of Prayer for Priests. And I'm pleased to be part of this organization, but we're just trying to help people pray. So they all want to pray for priests and say, well, where do I begin? Well, here. Go to this page, there's a rosary, a preparation, there's this, there's that. So again, we all need good manuals. So a little plug for the Foundation of Prayer for Priests. So there's something on that. Great.
Okay.
Fun. Yes.
When you were speaking, I was reminded of what Jesus said before he passed, left the world. He told his disciples, I've come to set fire upon the earth.
Yeah.
And I wish it were already burning, blazing, So that fire, that is what happens when we fall in love with Jesus. You want to do everything possible. You are ready to stake your neck. You are ready to die for the cause of that. It's like the BC fire, Florida fire. It keeps burning. Everything it crosses, it burns it. Nothing can stop it. So that's how it really works. That's the fire I saw when you were speaking, how not a man like any other man, you take up this cause. You don't mind whatever it will cost you moving from one extreme from one part of the world to the other, spreading the word. I mean, it shows that love has really caught you, the fire of that love, or the arrow of that love, So I think that is basically what we all are called to do as Christians. Not only Sarah. Sarah will sharpen it a little bit. As Sarah, you have a specific thing to do, vocations, But as Christians in general, we are called to do that. And the apostles also showed this, after Jesus empowered them with the Holy Spirit. Wow. They were like set on fire, going all over the place, preaching and spreading the word, without the suffering that came along with that, So having made that appreciation, I have two questions. The first, what are the major sources of Fulton Sheen's formation and encounter with God? You mentioned St. Thomas Aquinas, but are the other sources? Because, I know St. Thomas Aquinas was such a soul, all good knowledge and every wisdom were in his heart and mind, and so himself alone is enough to fill up Fulton Sheen with these wonderful ideas, So that's the first question. Are there other sources, maybe from theologians, that he encountered, because the light is passed from one to the other. Right. The second question, what do you say about Mary? What is the role of Mary in this whole life and spiritual patrimony? I believe he has a strong doctrine of Mary, as the motto says there, per Mariam me venire, come to me through Mary, would be more or less a translation. So these are the two questions.
Yes, okay. So I'll answer the position of strength and that his writings on Mary first, your second question first. Fulton Sheen, of course, I want to say, had an unfair advantage in that his mother took him as a newborn babe and put him at the statue of Our Lady and consecrated him to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so a mother's heart says, my boy is yours. And so there was a consecration there. And the mother and father formed him in this very beautiful Marian devotion. And when Fulton Sheen received his first Holy Communion when he was 12, because it was back then when you had to be older to receive your first Holy Communion, he then consecrated his life to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he always knew he wanted to be a priest ever since he was a little boy. But he started that little consecration when he was 12 and his first Holy Communion. So these sacramental unions with Our Lady, baptism to Our Lady, first Holy Communion to Our Lady. So then Fulton Sheen, in his priesthood, when he became a priest, he made it very clear that every Saturday he would offer the Mass in honor of the Blessed Virgin Mary and his priesthood, because a priest is allowed to pray for himself and his intentions. So again, he put his priesthood under her protection. And of course, when he became a bishop, his coat of arms was that I may come to him through the mother. So that Latin translation, that per matrem venere, is that I may come to Christ through the mother. So everything through Mary to Christ. Sheen, I always like to say, would shame us, and again, this is the way he works, to loving her more. He would give an example. He'd say, I come over to, what happens if I came over to Teresa Bonafede's house and I spent time with Teresa Bonafede and I never acknowledged her mother? And I just kept talking to her but never acknowledged her mother. How would that make you feel? Well, it's kind of as very rude, but to acknowledge the mother. And so he kind of brought us in this way to say, if you're going to acknowledge Christ, always acknowledge his mother. He would say that our Lord took 3 hours on the cross to redeem the world, 3 years to teach his disciples, but he spent 30 years with her, and he chose her twice. Once, of course, he says, I want to become human, and I want to come to the earth and go through her. And second of all, when he was 12 years old, and he was doing the work of the Father, he was doing his Father's business, and she came and found him in the temple, he then said, I want to live with you again. He was of bar mitzvah age. He was a man. He was ready to work. But he knew to say, I want to be formed by you. And he grew in wisdom and holiness in that formation. Fulton Sheen would always say, if you want to become a Christian, who better to form you than the Blessed Virgin Mary? For she formed Christ. So again, this theology that he really says, go to her. And so the book that he wrote, The World's First Love, Fulton Sheen's on record to say it was his favorite book to write. Of all the 66 books he wrote, he keeps going back to this, The World's First Love. A question I ask sometimes in a lecture is that, if you could make your mother, how would you make her? And so I always just say, well, if I could make my mother, she wouldn't hit me. She would give me 3 cookies instead of 1. My curfew would be 1 in the morning. No, sorry. No. But I would make my mom really sweet, okay? But because Jesus, we know him as the second person of the Blessed Trinity, because Jesus is God. He created the heavens, the earth, everything. Yet he pre-existed his mother. He pre-existed her. So he got to make his own mother. You just think about that he got to make his own mother. And so that's the beauty, and that Sheen says that in so many of his writings. He pre-existed Mary because he's God. And he made her. So she is, he made her the most beautiful, the most kind. She's our mother. And that's why he continues to point to us. And we learn by example at the foot of the cross. You see John with her, but Magdalene's her companion. That Magdalene, just say, she knew. you know, and of course, Mary mothered the new church. So she went back to live with John, but she mothered the church. She was there to form the apostles, so she can mother us. So I don't know if that answers your second question.
Absolutely did. I was about to ask what book, but you have already said it. The World's First Love.
That's right.
Okay.
And don't worry, someone else will buy it for you too. Okay, sir. Yes. I still have to answer his first question, but ladies first, okay?
Oh,
No,
was there
I didn't.
someone else?
No, but we'll share it. I'll come back to your first question.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
But
fine.
no.
I was thinking, you answered.
No, I answered his second question because I know
Oh,
it's
okay.
a position of strength for me.
Well, answer the first one.
Okay, so the first one that he asked was more of Sheen's formation and was he formed, you know, with mystics? What was he reading? Who was mentoring him? These are the questions that we're saying, you know, what made Sheen who he is today? In his studies, again, where he received his doctorate was he wrote his doctoral thesis on God and Intelligence, 1925. You can buy the book, God and Intelligence. And G.K. Chesterton, the great writer, wrote the foreword for that book. So Chesterton was passing a baton to Fulton Sheen. So the foreword of Fulton Sheen's first book, God and Intelligence, the foreword was written by G.K. Chesterton. Okay, so that's just a note there. But because Sheen was studying in England and the Louvain, Belgium, he had many of the European writers around him. So he had met Chesterton and stuff. He was meeting with the great thinkers of the time. But Fulton Sheen, in his studies, he studied St. Thomas Aquinas and he read all 33 books, translated all of them from Latin to English, like he had to, because it was all written in Latin. So it took him years. Of course, when you go do your doctoral thesis, it takes you years, but he just was consumed by St. Thomas Aquinas. So that body of work kept him busy on that. So his formation, the only that I know of but Fulton Sheen was an avid reader. So I'm sure that he read everything that was put in front of him. And he was an avid reader since he was a little boy. Even on the farm, he always had his nose in a book. So, but to record, I'd have to say, the only thing I know of formally is Aquinas. There's no, he never talks about reading St. Catherine of Agreda although he did have a great devotion to St. Therese of Lisieux because he was a third order Carmelite. So Fulton Sheen was a third order Carmelite, and he gave many reflections to Carmelites and gave a great novena of talks in Dublin, Ireland. And there's a book called A Treasured Love Story, Fulton Sheen's, these talks he gave in Dublin, Ireland. But again, he loved the Carmelites and was a third order Carmelite. It's kind of like everybody wants to claim them. So Carmelites are pretty good. Usually they would brag, but they don't. I mean, it's understood. I mean, and Sheen actually says that in the book too. So anyway, Father, I don't know.
Perfect. Thank you. Absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
Well, Fulton Sheen had a lot of gifts that he was given to. Can you speak to any of with someone who has been blessed and with a lot of in his life? He probably had some practical challenges or obstacles as he went forward. Was that right?
Well,
crosses, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, he was a sickly kid. Okay, so Fulton Sheen was only 5'7", always 110 pounds. Like he's not a big man. He had respiratory problems as a child, and so he had heart issues at the end. He had open heart surgery a number of times. He never had good health in the end, So he was a sickly boy to begin with, and his health, although he had great energy and stuff like that, I would just say he wasn't blessed with perfect health. He had great crosses in that he had a great deal of professional jealousy. Many of his fellow priests and bishops I just say jealous. That's the only word I can really say, is because he was getting on television and he had these appointments, and he was the head of the Pontifical Mission Society for 16 years in the United States, traveled the world, lectured, everywhere. So some people maybe look and say, I could have done that too, and so there was that jealousy, and there was the fights between him and Cardinal Spellman, and they've been documented. These were fights over milk money. There was a big war years ago where Cardinal Spellman gave $1 million worth of milk to Bishop Sheen to feed the poor in the missions because it was excess. He didn't even need it for the poor. And so a year later, Cardinal Spellman said, oh, by the way, can you give me $1 million for that milk I gave you? And he said, I can't, because you gave me that to the missions, and I can't take money from the missions and give it back to you. So there was that fight, and they had to go to the Vatican, and the Holy Father sided with Sheen, because they had to go and petition. So Cardinal Spellman, Bishop Sheen, the two in front of the Holy Father, and the Holy Father said that Bishop Sheen was right. So Cardinal Spellman wasn't happy, And so there's the rumors that he had him, shipped to Rochester, which was, these are the stories. But Fulton Sheen, in his autobiography, never is bitter. He doesn't point to he just took it and just said, it's part of my cross as a priest. And he just says, wherever I'm sent, I'm going to go. I'm going to serve. And he did that to the very end. A note that Sheen, when he actually died in 1979 on December the 9th. So we just celebrated his 39th year of his passing. But he died in front of the Blessed Sacrament.
Wow,
In his
interesting.
chapel, under the shadow of the cross. Because Fulton Sheen had his apartment, so he had his bedroom, his office, and then his chapel. And so, he always had to go from the office. When he was in the office, he could still see the Lord with his writings and stuff. And then he would have his time to pray. And then, of course, when he went to his bedroom, he always had a genuflect in front of the tabernacle to go to bed. And Fulton Sheen had a 5-foot-tall crucifix at the foot of his bed. So every morning he woke up, big Jesus. And every time he went to bed, big Jesus. Died on the cross for me, right? And so that's part of his formation. So I always say his formation was the cross. He was formed by Christ crucified. And he was very good at preaching Christ crucified. Yes. Yes, sir.
Were there any particular works by Thomas Aquinas that inspired him in particular? Do you know? Or?
No, I think because he covered it from beginning to end. But he never really said this part of the Summa Theological was more important than the other. He just, I don't know of any record. There may be other people that have studied his studies that could answer that question better than I could. I don't know of any. Yes?
I know there was an issue about where he will be canonized.
Yes.
Right? In
Great.
the city or...
Yeah. So, people always ask me about the fight. Fulton Sheen, the cause is pretty simple. You start a cause for his canonization, you file with Rome, and then you send all the literature and they approve it. Then you have to have a miracle. And so there was a medical miracle that was approved, and a little boy that was dead for 61 minutes and came back to life. And then the theologians approved everything. So the last thing to remain was to exhume his body and harvest relics for distribution to churches, hair, whatever is there. So the cause for his canonization, Peoria, went to New York and said, okay, we're ready for the body now. We need to exhume the body and continue the beatification process. And that's where New York said, no, we want to keep the body.
I know.
And the problem started there. The body was promised by 2 other bishops. So the bishop that's resident saying, no, that was their opinion, this is mine. I want the tourist dollars. I want this. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's saying, I want to keep them. So that's where the fight happened. So we had to suspend the cause. It's almost like a parent saying, you two sort it out. You go to your room, and when you guys make up, come back. So the cause was suspended, and now the courts have taken over. And so Peoria keeps winning in the courts, but in the courts you get 3 chances. So Peoria has won 2 court appeals already, and so now New York has done the 3rd appeal. So it's still in the courts, you know. It makes sense to have the body come to Peoria, because that's where he was born. But this is the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has been fighting over bodies for a long time, so. Okay, yes.
I think we're all called to evangelize.
Yes.
And you have certainly found your call and how to do that. And I can't think of a week that I don't run into someone who questions God or my faith or whatever. I relate because I myself went out and searched and bought a lot of books. There was a big fight in my house. We're going to keep these books. So I've decided I'm not buying any books anymore. Do you have digital
Yes, yeah.
copies of your books?
So for example, because again, I embrace new technology.
Yeah.
So these are memory sticks.
Wonderful.
So because I have every book that Fulton Sheen ever wrote, when we scan them, we have every book he ever wrote on a thumb drive. Every talk, there's 400 talks, or, you know, basically 80 hours on a thumb drive, right? I put on a prayer card every downloadable link, so I can say to you, here's my website, download. If you want just his stuff on this, just cut and paste that. So we've embraced the technology. Almost all of Sheen's writings are public domain. The talks are all public domain. So the audio talks, you know, some people try to copyright them, but they just copyright their version of whatever. So I have everything on digital, just on a prayer card. And I learned from a missionary in Russia, and this is how I did it, is that my friend was a missionary in Russia, and how he evangelized with prayer cards. And so, you know, they didn't want you to have books, so we had a few prayer cards. And then when he was doing mission work, he would hand out the prayer cards. And so for me, this is what I found, is that these little prayer cards bring people to the website, and then from there, the website, they can download everything for free. So I have a beautiful prayer card of Fulton Sheen with the radio, and every downloadable link, every one of his videos, every one of his audio talks, every one of his books, you can download for free through the website.
So you have digitized payment today?
Yeah, I do. I always have Visa, Master. I take stolen credit card. That works between you and God. Yeah. So I have all that. So, I mean, I still like books. Don't get me wrong. I have a tablet. I have all this. I can scroll all day long. But there's something about
Yes, I agree.
this.
Yeah.
There is.
I spend a lot of time in my car. I
Yeah.
can plug it in, it works.
That's true.
Very
That's
good.
good.
You know, some drives don't cost that much anymore, right? So I always just buy cheap Chinese. What, $3? Okay, I'll get 100 of those. Okay. No, but we downloaded everything onto thumb drives and gave it to seminarians. I said to seminarians, here's Fulton Sheen's library, your way, because they just put it into their computer, copy paste, then give it to the next guy. One memory stick does 20 people or whatever. They just all copy it and away they go. So I have that technology.